Hello, and welcome to Writing the Cover Letter for the Academic Job Search in the United States. I'm Eileen Alexander. I'm going to walk us through this presentation. Mostly you'll hear my voice and not see my face, but I wanted to introduce myself so you know there's a real person behind what you will hear and review. A short addition to this introductory slide I want to add by speaking the URL for the resources. That URL is z.umn.edu/cover-letter-resources-gs. Again, z.umn.edu/cover-letter-resources-gs. And in each case where I've said the word hyphen, I'm wanting to indicate the character that's on your keyboard and not the word hyphen. I want to open this presentation with a reminder that your cover is not a letter that simply transmits materials to someone who will receive those materials. Rather, it's a letter that brings the various elements of your experience and your application materials into a unified, persuasive narrative. This letter then is your first opportunity to persuade that hiring committee that you and you alone, or maybe with a few others, are a candidate to advance to the next round, to online interviews, to face-to-face interviews, to campus. And in this, a reminder from Leonard Cassuto. Use your letter to pull together your application. Your cover letter is just one part of the package, but it's the leading part. While your CV lists your credentials, your cover letter explains them. In effect, Cassuto points out your cover letter is an argument, and it's part of an argument that you want to make bracingly simple in his language. It's a chance to say, I'm the best person for this particular position, and you should hire me. You, of course, none of us can really say, I'm the best person for the job, hire me for these reasons. We can make that persuasive point by thinking about 5 elements. How we organize, which begins with doing research about the institution and the department you're sending your application to. About preparing, and that's not starting to write the letter. That's starting to think about, here's what they ask for, here's my skill and experience that aligns with that. And then we move into drafting, composing some base letters, we'll call them. Then we move into writing, where you attend to audience and write a more dynamic, tweaked, or tailored letter for that particular position, for that particular audience. And then you send it. And in sending it, you want to make your letter accessible, and we'll offer a couple of ideas for that as well. Organization and research are job 1 for beginning your cover letter. A first step to collect the copies of the documents you'll be called on to share at some point in a job search. Those would include things like your CV or resume, your teaching learning philosophy, your research statement, any teaching materials that you might want to share. Typically, it's a syllabus and evidence of teaching effectiveness, and also writing samples. You want those organized in one Google folder that you can always link to, make copies from, share from. The second part of doing your research that's organizational is thinking about how to set up your applications. The advice that commonly gets offered and seems to work quite well is that you create one Google folder or one folder on your computer, wherever you want to store things, per application, and put copies into that folder of the things that you've tweaked, that you're ready to send to that institution along with your cover letter. As part of setting up that organizational structure, you'll want to have a planning checklist document where you keep track of all the pieces you have to pull together for each application, list noting what documents you've prepared and where to find them if you're not putting copies into the folder, and also an analysis of the job post that lists criteria that they want. So you start with the job post, highlight it, annotate it so that you're really clear in that one place where you start out what kinds of criteria they're looking for. And you'll begin then to link to specific concrete notes later on in doing your research. You're going to want to review targeted sites and publications for announcements each week. Talk to advisors, mentors, people who are 2 years out in the program about places they might encourage you to look at. Look at the organizations and journals that are attached to your particular field and do a little word of mouth searching and some Googling to find out if there are particular blogs that are written for postdocs and graduate students who are seeking academic positions or non-academic positions, a different kind of cover letter. But again, look for both and do this regularly. There is definitely not a one letter or one size fits all cover letter to write. There are at least two base letters that you want to consider and perhaps a third. One base letter would be research focused, where the emphasis is on publications, conferences, recognition for your research, and then teaching in your discipline. And people increasingly want to know that you're effective at teaching if you've already done that. And also grants and supervision of undergraduates and graduates become important things to mention in a research focused letter, again, though, based on criteria set out in the job call, and often in the order that that job call sets them out will tell you the hierarchy. A typical hierarchy for a teaching focused institution, which might be a liberal arts school or a community college or a comprehensive university, is that teaching will come first. That you've developed some courses and you've participated in curriculum design is a lovely thing to people who are seeking a candidate for a teaching focused position. That you've done learning centered teaching that's based on current scholarship. They want to understand how what you do fits with effective practices. They're going to want to know your evidence. They're going to want to think about the teaching experience you have in multiple learning spaces, online, face to face, field and lab, discussions and participation, and give you room to publish on the scholarship of teaching as well as doing professional development. Mentoring comes into that, and so does teaching success. There's a category that's both. Typically, liberal arts institution might be a mix of both. They want you to do research because many students from liberal arts colleges are going to go on to do graduate work and need to be prepared for that. Comprehensive universities often do a mix of research focused and teaching focused, as they want people to be practicing and providing leadership in their disciplines because they're providing education to future professionals, often at graduate level, master's degrees certainly, and often doctoral or PhD. So again, think about there being 2 to 3 bases that you want to start from in shaping a cover letter from your research. I've mentioned that there are two primary types of institutions to be thinking about: research focused, teaching focused, a third that is some combination of the two, sometimes with more research or more teaching involved. And there is a fourth, something that breaks out of all of those categories. The Carnegie classification system was set up about 50 years ago to describe the institutional diversity in the United States. And it does this through custom listings, where you can click on hyperlinks to discover information about undergraduate programs, graduate programs. You can learn about the enrollment profile of particular programs, the undergraduate profile. Are they residential, non-residential? The size of the campus, the setting of the campus, and whether they engage in community engagement projects. This is a great starting place for two reasons. One, you can find out about undergraduate instructional programs, and you'll get a listing of many universities that provide undergraduate instructional programs. You can filter those based on size, setting, the profile of undergraduates, and in that may discover some universities you don't know about that could be great places for you to do teaching learning work. And you can further investigate each of those places that are new to you and see what kinds of openings they might have. A first step in that further investigation could be going to the Carnegie's institution lookup, where you can type in the names of a particular institution. It will provide those profile details. And often in providing those details will point to institutions like that one. The easiest way to direct you toward these resources is to say to go to a favorite browser of yours, type in Carnegie classification, and use the phrases institution lookup, and then follow through with the URLs that will be provided. And this brings us to the second component, prepare. And the preparation depends on drawing on the job post, tracking down the job post, and using the most complete job announcement or job post that you can find. Typically, this will be on the institution's website. The advertisement for a post may have a really succinct description along with a URL that allows you to access that full description. If that URL is not there, go ahead and contact the Human Resources Unit at the particular university by email or a phone call. You're going to be in touch with them along the way as you're applying for the job anyway. This is something as a service they're happy to provide to point people in the right direction. Once you have that complete job announcement, the post, you're going to begin that process of determining where this institution and where the job fits as an institutional type. Again, you could use the Carnegie lookup that we referenced in the first component, and also think of those general categories that we referenced in the first component, the research focused, teaching focused, or both. Harkening back to the beginning where we advocated for starting a Google folder or some sort of folder system to track each job application that you send out. One of the first documents, maybe the third document you start to put in there, is a spreadsheet or a Word document that helps you begin to track and add information. Their job qualifications, the skills, the experience they require, what's preferred, and your qualifications, experiences that match those are among the first things to begin noting. Again, you're looking for alignment. What are they asking for? What are my qualifications that exist, that are in process, that I'm interested in working on? Read the job announcement as a hierarchy. Often what's listed first in the job announcement is, again, the top, the most important, the most heavily weighted, and it moves on down. Use that to organize the beginning of your record keeping and making notes about how your experience aligns with their requirements. I'm going to spend a bit of time here with a job announcement example from Old Dominion University asking for an English department assistant professor position. In this particular position, they're looking for expertise in English education, pedagogy and literacy as part of it, and experience teaching in or working with secondary schools. They're also looking for someone who can coordinate the teaching emphasis of both the undergraduate and master's level program. The requirements include a PhD by the time of appointment, knowledge of or experience with assessment, and proven success with teaching, as well as an active research profile. Notice that there's a hierarchy in there. The PhD, the knowledge and experience with assessment, the proven success in teaching, and an active research profile. And now we're going to link that chart that I introduced and the job description that I introduced in one example of they asked for, they do, my qualifications, I do. The PhD at time of appointment in particular areas is a requirement. There are my qualifications listed with the date that I will complete it. Knowledge of assessment is one of their requirements. 2 examples of coursework and use of assessment as a research focus in the dissertation. Success with teaching, and I list as the person filling this out, for example, the courses that I've taught. Active research profile, information about my research, publications are asked for as desirable. I provide some publications that I can call on if I'm the person who's writing this. Expertise in pedagogy and literacy, examples of that, experience teaching and working actively in secondary schools, again, information about that. At this point, I want to encourage you to add a third column so that you can begin explicitly addressing their criteria, providing concrete example. So you can directly state instead of a list what your requirements are in terms of generating sentences or phrases that you want to hold in mind so that you can use them when you actually get to drafting. Often when we first read an announcement and begin tracking this, we have great insights about how we might describe it. Write them down. Don't lose them. Don't hope that you will remember them someday. And in doing that, you get to use this generative writing in a way that helps you to think about what they do and what you do. Where you're saying, you do these things at your university, I do these things in my practice. So as you're tailoring and thinking about that particular university, if you see that in the you do at this English department position is that they teach courses at night to people who are practitioners in secondary education, you can say, I do those things when I teach this class. It's important to not skip this part. As I said, write down the ideas as they come to you so you can come back to it later and tweak the wording as needed with a particular application that you're writing at a later stage. Let me break down the you do and I do just a little bit. The you that you're thinking about might be the department. What does the department do? What do particular faculty members do? What are the programs, initiatives, or centers of the department on campus that do things that align with skills that you have and that show up in the job description? And what do they do in the classroom? On that other side, as an example, the I do can include, I'm particularly interested in this department because of its commitment to examining media communications from a global perspective, challenging the Western media model, which I'm doing my own work on by examining media portrayals of race and class in coverage of labor unions in the US and Chile. The start of what could be material for a final polished cover letter. You do, I do, and this is addressed as an example in the resource materials that we've provided for you. And here we are at component number 3, where you begin to draft, to do the initial composing of your base letters. One of those base letters might be a research-focused base letter. It might be further fine-tuned depending on the job call for leading a research lab. It might be a job application cover letter that you're writing for a postdoc position. It might be a letter that you're writing for a smaller institution, a liberal arts, a particular community serving university. It might also be that what you're being asked to do is a staff position that involves teaching through supervising graduate students, postdocs, and mentoring undergraduate. In composing those base letters, remember to address the substance of your research. You're moving away from a focus on your already completed dissertation to your full research brief and future research directions and plans. Similarly, when you compose the base letter for a teaching institution, you, based on the job call, will find that you are writing different sorts of base letters. One might be for a teaching professor or staff lecturer position at any type of an institution where 90% of your work is about teaching. You might be writing this base letter as an applicant for a tenure track faculty position at a comprehensive university where teaching matters, and it's probably going to also matter at graduate level. And you're going to have some research to do, and you're going to guide people's research. You might be applying for tenure track faculty at a liberal arts institution, which is often a balance of teaching and research. So you're going to be thinking about that base letter as sort of that both. It's the two categories coming together. Tenure track faculty at a two-year college, it's all about the teaching, and mentoring and advising comes in. And also, your teaching focus base letter might be for a clinical faculty or staff position in a professional or graduate or undergraduate institution. So there are variations on the theme, a little bit of fine tuning, which is why you might be writing more than one base letter and even more than two. Victoria Reyes, who's the author of one of the resources we've shared with you, notes that a cover letter may be the first thing a search committee sees alongside the CV. So in this, you want to make sure it captures their attention in a good way. Yeah, no pressure, right, in doing this? But you've got this. You've got the generative writing that you've already started working on. It's the stuff of listing out their requirements, how you meet those requirements, and the writing you've begun to do about you do, I do. And you've done this for thinking about all of it based on the job post criteria. In addition to the you've got this based on the research you've done about the institution and the department, and the writing about your qualifications based on the job criteria, and beginning to brainstorm and generate the you do this, I do this, keep these two notes in mind. You're writing as a potential colleague, not as a student. You're ready to make this transition, and that your audience has similar but not exactly the same research and teaching interests of you, and they need to learn about you and your work. As we're about to move from component 3 to component 4, one more reminder from Victoria Reyes. This is a stage as you're moving from drafting the base letter to tweaking and developing the letter you will send out, where you want to take care to understand and communicate how you align and contribute to a given department, how you and your work connect to the departmental activities and communities across a college or university. This means, she notes, elaborating on your approach to teaching for a liberal arts college, for example, and demonstrating what your publication and research can specifically bring to a research university. And so here we are at stage 4, component 4, where you're tailoring those base letters for a specific audience. You have a particular job post in mind, you review the base letter to make sure that it aligns generally with the position that you're applying for. You look at your analysis table for that particular post. You review the materials that you might need to make reference to or send along. And from that, you tailor your most relevant base letter. You make it dynamic, that is relevant to a specific audience context. And what if in your reviewing, the base letters don't align? Say that you're intending to teach at a research university at grad level, but you find yourself applying for a hospital-based institutional position. Again, working with health professionals, you might need to tweak that and talk about the hospital context. You might be applying at a liberal arts school that's also a historically Black college or university, and you want to attend to that in your writing. Or you might be applying to a comprehensive professional program that offers mainly online courses, some evening courses, and weekend courses. So pay attention to what's slightly different in those job calls. that you will need to address in your base letter. And writing that dynamic cover letter is going to be much easier now because you've done all the pre-writing and you're writing it as a complement to your dynamic CV. As we pointed out in the CV presentation, you take something that's a static CV, everything you've ever done, and you also tailor it to the particular institution. You're not reiterating your CV in this cover letter, but you're weaving the pieces of your experience together so that people understand the ways in which you can become part of that community to do the work that community wants to have done. When you get to this stage, you can begin to think about some formatting considerations, some flourishes that you might add. Using official letterhead is an important thing to do. If you are a teaching assistant or a staff member in a department, you have access to the official letterhead. If there's a tradition in your department of not using official letterhead, make your own. Create your own, as in this example where someone has taken the University of Minnesota Driven to Discover as that template and then worked from there. We provide some other examples of writing your own letterhead or designing your own letterhead in a guide that's part of your resource folder. In addition to format, this is a great chance as you're polishing, tweaking, getting ready to send out that letter to a specific position to think about organization. There are some general paragraph organizational things that you can think of, and it's perfectly fine to review these while you're doing the base writing, but to come back to them again when you're doing the final letter, thinking about your interest in the position, the significant criteria that you want to address in the second and third paragraphs, the working your way more through the analysis of the job announcement, the things that are less specific or less weighted, and thinking about throughout this, by the time you get to the fifth paragraph, you want them to have read some really great lead sentences that state what they seek, the you do, I do pairing, and that closing paragraph where you're professional and friendly and expressing your interest in them and their institution. When you're thinking about organization, try to forget some of the structure of academic paragraphs that you've learned where they're very long. Think about them as shorter, vary the length, sometimes break a paragraph in half so you set out the general idea, and then in the next paragraph provide a specific, and you can provide transitions and signposts, little cues that say what it is you're focusing on in a particular paragraph. In addressing content, I want to take a minute to address what not to do. And I want to start with something that's not on this list. Do not, in writing your cover letter, name what you do not do as a researcher, as a teacher. For example, I do not lecture my students for 50 minutes. For the person who does do that and perhaps does it well and does it with pauses and does it with effective practices, you may be signaling that you do not respect their approach. That's not a way to interact with the community you seek to become part of. There are some mundane phrases that are great to show up in initial drafts. I'm applying for an assistant professor of English position. I think I would be a great fit. As you're revising and tweaking, again, bring in those specifics about what they do and what you do that aligns with that. And as one of our resource authors notes, avoid that word fit, because fit is a nebulous term. Show them what you do, show them the alignments. Your dissertation is sort of past tense at this stage. You're about to become a PhD for most positions. We'll ask for that as something that's in place. So your dissertation is done. It may open up to next research related to it. And you want to think about that full brief. If you're writing a letter to a liberal arts college, a comprehensive university, It's probably less important to talk about your dissertation than it is your future research, if that's part of the job. And if you're writing for a community college job or some position that's specifically teaching oriented, your dissertation only shows up in your CV and not in your cover letter. The research interests, again, speak to what they're looking for and what you bring, and think about if this is the type of institution that wants to know those. Embed your teaching philosophy in specific descriptions of how you describe the learning and teaching that you seek to do. And rather than I look forward to hearing from you, we all look forward to hearing from people who might be in a position to offer us a job. Note, in summary, why it is you would like to find yourself in this position, what the alignments and the fit are. What to do in the content. Some of these are reminders of things I've said previously, and all of them link to the resources that we've provided you, the few brief resources. Always be thinking about the readers. Your audience is important here. And all of them are new in some way to you and to your research. You want to write as a future colleague with unique skills and approaches. You want to move them in this letter through a narrative about who you are as a scholar. Compose short paragraphs is a way to do that. Some long ones, some short ones. Variation is good. Bottom of the first page, make sure that it ends in the middle of a sentence, so they have to turn to page 2 and see what you have to say in the last part of your sentence. Provide signposts, and those are little signal words, like as a researcher, as a scholar, as a teacher. Those things highlight what you're talking about in a particular paragraph. Then you can also make a transition by referencing, in these examples I've given of teaching and learning, I showcase the ways in which I value student input. You've made a transition from paragraphs where you may have talked about specific teaching examples to a summing up. And for now, as you're writing even this draft that's you're hoping to send out very soon, be okay with jargon, too much detail, and hyperbole, where you really congratulate yourself on what you're doing. You will come back to that. You can always come back and change language, whether it's jargon, too much detail, hyperbole, too much use of to be verbs or passive construction. You can come back to that as you're working with stage 5, where you're getting ready to send it. But first you send it to friendly readers before you send it to your target audience. Writing for an audience is never a solo activity. We should always have friendly readers and responders. All writers need readers, and we need to depend on those early readers who will provide honest and timely feedback. One way to work with our readers, who might be advisors, mentors, alums of the program who are 2 years out and already have jobs. It might be another person who's applying for a different set of jobs, maybe in a whole nother field, who can read, especially for jargon and insider information that someone who's on your committee may not understand as an outsider to your discipline. The thing to do here is provide them with a memo. Describe the audience, the things you have to convey in the letter, ask them to point to what works and what could work better, and ask 2 or 3 specific questions to identify the feedback you seek. You might even in this memo talk about what you see are the strengths of your letter and what you feel could be better. We provide an example of a memo in that resource folder too. Proofread at this stage before you seek feedback and as closure to revision. Don't worry about feedback or proofreading along the way. Do it if it's natural to you, but don't make it the first line of work when you're doing those earlier drafts. You want to get ideas out and you can come back and proofread. And when it feels ready to send, do one last thing. Read it out loud, record it, read it to someone who's listening and writing notes. Just read it so you hear it in your own ways. You're feeling how it resonates with you. If you're signing, sign it and watch yourself sign it. Sign into a mirror and see your expressions, see what it is you capture from the signs that you're offering. Think about how that feedback you get from seeing your signing or hearing your voice, helps you to hear flaws, hear glitches, hear little things that yet need to be corrected. One last bit of work at stage 5, component 5 for sending is making your letter accessible. There are different types of documents. There are PDFs and there are Word or Google documents. My advice as someone who works with people who need accessible documents is to provide 2 routes, a PDF and a Word document or a Google document. If you're someone who's learned to be afraid of sharing Word documents or Google documents, remember that someone can copy and paste things from your PDF as well. They're all open to people copying and pasting. But what you want to be thinking about is how can someone easily and quickly have access to the document you've provided. Some PDFs can be read by screen readers, many cannot. A Word or Google document can be. There are little tips that you can do within a letter if you're providing a hyperlink. Perhaps you have been asked to share a collection of teaching resources and you have a URL for that. Don't put the URL into your letter. Go to a URL generating site, a URL shortening site such as z.umn.edu for the University of Minnesota, and shorten those hyperlinks. One of the things that happens with assistive technology, if you provide a very long hyperlink, it reads every single character out loud. And one of the things that happens for people who are reading your letters is all of those numbers and letters put together into a URL can be disorienting as they're reading and cause awkward breaks. So use hyperlinks, and you're also showing that you know some standards of accessibility, which more and more faculty are being expected to demonstrate in the teaching materials they create. In order to create accessible documents and slides, there are a couple of resources that you can go to. The University of Minnesota has a great guide on using 7 core skills, which includes working with a style sheet that sets up the typeface, the space between paragraphs, the margins, the kinds of typeface that you use. We spell out some of these also in a cover letter formatting and organizing guide that we've made available. All of these will help you make your letter accessible, and that's what you want, is people to be able to access your letter in terms of technology and in terms of content. So you've worked all along up till this stage to make sure that your letter is one that's approachable, that shows you to be approachable and astute and clever and clear and creative. Make sure that your letter also becomes accessible in these very tactile, technologically oriented ways. And in closing, I want to highlight once more the resources we've made available for you in a Google folder. The URL again for that Google folder is z.umn.edu/cover letter resources GS. There are 6 documents in that folder, one by Leonard Casuto, one by Karen Kelsky, one by Victoria Reyes, and one by Kel Weinhold, and 2 from the Center for Educational Innovation. All are available as Google documents with links to the original blog posts where they exist. Thank you for attending to the ideas in this presentation.